My daughter-in-law told me to know my place, but she regretted it when the door opened. They laughed at me in that conference room. 20 years of loyalty crushed under the weight of a 34-year-old's ego. But what Ryan Cole didn't know was that while he was taking credit for my work, I was already planning my exit to a company that would pay me more in one contract than he'd see all year. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sat in the weekly performance review meeting at Hawthorne Logistics. Ryan Cole, my 34-year-old boss, leaned back in his chair with that smirk I'd learned to recognize over the past 6 months. "Come on, Jack," he said, loud enough for everyone at the conference table to hear. "You've been here, 20 years? If you were going to make 6 figures, it would have happened already." The laughter that followed felt like knives cutting through my chest. I looked around the table at faces I'd trained, people I'd helped through tough projects, co-workers I'd considered friends. Not one of them met my eyes. Not one spoke up. Sarah from accounting actually covered her mouth to hide her smile. That's when I understood with crystal clarity. Loyalty meant absolutely nothing here anymore. The company I'd given 2 decades of my life to had become a place where experience was mocked and age was a punchline. The drive home that evening felt longer than usual. My old pickup truck rattled along the highway, the check engine light glowing like a reminder of everything I couldn't afford to fix. I kept replaying Ryan's words in my head, the casual cruelty of them, the way he'd weaponized my dedication against me. In the rearview mirror, I caught sight of my own face. Tired eyes with crow's feet, gray creeping into my temples, the weathered look of a man who'd spent 20 years giving his best to people who'd stopped noticing. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Somewhere between exit 12 and exit 15, something shifted inside me. The anger cooled into something harder, clearer. I thought about my father, who'd worked himself to death for a pension that barely covered his funeral. I wasn't going to be that man. "I'm done giving my best to people who don't value it," I said aloud to my empty truck. The words felt like a promise. I walked through my apartment door at 8:45, later than I'd intended. The place was quiet, just me and the hum of the refrigerator. My phone buzzed with a text from Laura, my ex-wife. "Emily's tuition payment is due Friday. Don't forget." The words sat heavy in my stomach. I was barely covering rent on this 1-bedroom apartment, splitting bills with a roommate I'd found on Craigslist. College payments felt like a mountain I'd never climb. I pulled out my work badge, staring at the photo from 5 years ago when I still smiled in pictures. Maybe Ryan was right. Maybe this was as far as I'd ever go. Maybe I really was just a clog in the system, too old to adapt, too stubborn to quit. I tossed the badge on the counter and opened the fridge, staring at leftovers I didn't want to eat. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow I'd figure out what to do next. But tonight I just felt defeated. The next morning, my phone rang while I was pouring coffee. Unknown number, local area code. I almost didn't answer. "Jack Turner?" a familiar voice asked. "It's Mark Ellison." My brain scrambled to place the name, then clicked. Mark, a client from 3 years ago who'd left for North Ridge Industrial. We'd worked together on a major supply chain overhaul that had saved his division hundreds of thousands. "Mark," I said, surprised. "Been a while." He laughed warmly. "Too long. Listen, I heard through the grapevine you're still at Hawthorne. I'm calling because we're expanding operations here at North Ridge. And honestly, your name came up in our planning meetings." My heart beat faster. "If you ever think about moving on, Jack, call me first. We could use someone like you. Someone who actually knows what they're doing." It was the first flicker of hope I'd felt in months, maybe years. "I'll keep that in mind," I said carefully. "Appreciate you thinking of me." That afternoon, Ryan dropped a new assignment on my desk with theatrical flair. "Jack, meet Kyle Patterson, our new data optimization specialist. Fresh out of grad school, sharp as they come. I want you to show him the ropes." Kyle was 27, wearing a suit that cost more than my monthly rent, and couldn't tell a logistics spreadsheet from a grocery list. Within 2 hours, he'd nearly crashed a client shipment by rearranging priority codes he didn't understand. I spent my lunch hour quietly fixing his mess, rerouting 3 trucks and calling in favors with warehouse supervisors. The next morning, Ryan sent an email to upper management praising Kyle's innovative approach to logistics optimization and noting excellent progress under my guidance. My name wasn't mentioned once. I read that email twice, sitting at my desk with my jaw clenched. Then I saved it to a personal folder I'd started keeping, not to sue, but to remember, to document every single time they erased my contributions. I didn't argue or complain. I just watched, took mental notes, and added another file to my growing collection. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like this story and also hit the subscribe button to get notified of our new series. 2 weeks later, HR called me in for what they described as a routine performance check. I knew better. The moment I walked into that small conference room and saw Ryan sitting beside Patricia from Human Resources, I understood this was an ambush. Patricia opened a folder with rehearsed sympathy. "Jack, we've noticed some concerns about your workflow efficiency. Your approach, while experienced, seems somewhat outdated for our current operational model." Ryan nodded along, adding, "The industry's evolving fast. We need people who can adapt quickly." They handed me a document, a 6-month performance improvement plan with weekly check-ins, measurable objectives, and language carefully designed to build a paper trail. I scanned the requirements, each one designed to be subjectively evaluated by Ryan himself. This wasn't about improvement. This was Ryan methodically setting me up to be replaced, building documentation to justify my termination while protecting the company from wrongful dismissal claims. "I understand," I said calmly, signing where they indicated. Patricia looked almost relieved. Ryan looked satisfied. Neither noticed the shift behind my eyes. At lunch that Thursday, I sat alone in the break room, eating the sandwich I'd packed that morning. Ryan walked past with Tyler from sales, their voices carrying. "Old dogs like Jack are great for grunt work," Ryan was saying, not bothering to lower his voice. "But this industry's for young blood. People who can think dynamically, not just follow the same playbook they learned in the 90s. Tyler laughed. "Harsh, man. Realistic," Ryan corrected. "In 5 years, guys like him will be obsolete. We're just managing the transition gracefully." I took another bite of my sandwich, chewing slowly, my expression unchanged. Inside, though, something cold and clear was crystallizing. A storm was brewing behind my calm eyes, gathering strength with every careless word, every dismissive gesture. Ryan had no idea what he'd set in motion. He saw an aging employee too beaten down to fight back. What he didn't see was a man who'd spent 20 years learning every system, building every relationship, understanding every pressure point in this industry. He'd made a critical mistake. He'd underestimated me. That evening, I stayed late after everyone else had left. The office was quiet except for the hum of computers and the distant sound of the cleaning crew. I began systematically organizing files I'd accumulated over 2 decades, client contact information, project documentation, performance reports, emails showing my contributions. I backed everything up to personal drives, organized by date and project. Not to sue. Lawsuits were expensive, time-consuming, and often hollow victories. No, I was protecting my legacy, preserving evidence of my knowledge base and the value I'd actually created. I documented every system I'd built, every process I'd streamlined, every client relationship I'd cultivated. If they wanted to erase me, they'd discover exactly what they'd lost. Hours passed. Around midnight, I closed my laptop and looked around the empty office. Ryan thought he was playing chess while I was stuck in checkers. He had no idea I'd already moved 3 steps ahead, planning something he couldn't see yet because he'd never respected me enough to watch carefully. The following Monday, Ryan stopped by my desk with his usual swagger. "Jack, I'm going to need you working this weekend. Big project coming up, and we need all hands pushing through." He said it like it was already decided, like my time was his to command. For 20 years, I would have said yes automatically, would have canceled plans and shown up because that's what loyal employees did. Instead, I looked up from my computer and said simply, "No, Ryan, my time's not free." His eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me?" I said no. "I have plans this weekend. If there's overtime work, I'll need it scheduled in advance with appropriate compensation, per company policy." The words came out calm, even polite, but the power dynamic had just shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, but it had shifted. Ryan's smirk returned quickly. Interesting timing, Jack. Given your performance review status. He walked away thinking he'd won, thinking he had me cornered. What he didn't realize was that, for the first time in years, I'd stopped caring about what he thought. I'd already started playing a different game entirely. That Saturday, I met my daughter Emily for dinner at her favorite Italian place near campus. She was home for the weekend, radiant with the confidence of someone discovering who they were meant to be. Over pasta, I found myself telling her about work, carefully edited, not wanting to burden her, but she saw through it immediately. "Dad, you've been unhappy there for years," she said, putting down her fork. "Why do you stay?" I started to give her the usual answers: security, benefits, responsibility, but she cut me off. "You've got more experience than those guys combined. You should start something of your own, consult, do something where people actually value what you know." I laughed, dismissing the idea. At my age? Starting over. But Emily looked at me with her mother's determination. "You're 53, not 80. And you're brilliant at what you do. Everyone knows it except apparently the idiots you work for." The idea planted itself like a seed in my mind, taking root despite my resistance. All the way home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Mark from North Ridge Industrial called again Tuesday morning, his voice urgent. "Jack, I know this is a big ask, but we're drowning over here. Supply chain disaster on the Brookfield project. 2 weeks behind schedule, penalties piling up. Would you be willing to look at it? I can't pay consulting rates yet without board approval, but I swear I'd owe you big time." Something in his desperation reminded me of myself years ago, fighting to prove my worth. After work, I drove to Northridge's offices and spent 3 hours reviewing their logistics nightmare. The problems were obvious to me: routing inefficiencies, communication breakdowns, a scheduling system that didn't account for regional variables. I sketched solutions on their whiteboard, made calls to contacts I'd built relationships with over decades, and restructured their delivery timeline. 2 days later, Mark called me, his voice thick with relief. "Jack, you just saved us 6 figures in penalties. The Brookfield project's back on track." He paused. "I meant what I said before. When you're ready to move on, I want you here." The next afternoon, I was making copies in the back office when I noticed a document someone had left on the printer. Confidential header, HR watermark. Curiosity made me glance at it, then my blood went cold. It was a termination planning list, dated for third quarter, 3 months away. My name was on it, Jack Turner termination. Pending Q3. Severance. Standard 2-week package. Below my name were 3 others, all long-term employees over 45. They were systematically clearing out the experienced staff, replacing us with cheaper, younger workers they could mold and control. I stood there for a long moment, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. Then I folded it carefully, tucked it into my pocket, and exhaled slowly. The last thread of loyalty I'd been clinging to finally snapped. I wasn't angry anymore, I was free. Free from the illusion that hard work would be rewarded, that dedication mattered, that they valued anything about me except my compliance. I walked back to my desk feeling lighter than I had in years. I was done waiting for fairness. That night, I opened my laptop and did something I hadn't done in 20 years. I updated my resume. It felt strange, listing accomplishments I'd almost forgotten, quantifying the value I'd created. Reduced shipping costs by 32%. Increased delivery efficiency by 40%. Built relationships with over 200 vendors and clients. Designed the logistics system still in use company-wide. The list went on, impressive even to me. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not Emily, not Laura, not the few coworkers I still trusted. Over the next week, I had 3 quiet meetings with Northridge's COO, Marcus Webb, coffee shops far from Hawthorne, discussions about operational philosophy and leadership style. Marcus was different from Ryan, older, thoughtful, someone who valued experience over ego. "We're building something different here," he said during our 3rd meeting. "We want people who know what they're doing, not just people who talk like they do." By the end of that conversation, we were discussing salary ranges that made my head spin. This is getting intense. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next when Jack finally makes his move. The final straw came during a client presentation 3 weeks later. Caldwell Manufacturing, a major account I'd personally cultivated for 8 years, had come in to discuss expanding their logistics contract. I'd prepared the entire proposal, built the cost models, designed the implementation timeline. During the meeting, Ryan interrupted me constantly, talking over my explanations, rephrasing my points as if they were his own insights, and taking credit for the logistics model I'd spent 2 months perfecting. After they left, Ryan caught me in the hallway. His smirk had evolved into something uglier, more contemptuous. "Face it, Jack," he said, voice low enough that no one else could hear. "You'll never make 6 figures. This is as far as you go. Some people are meant to lead and some people are meant to follow." I looked at him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "You might be right about that, Ryan." His smirk widened, satisfied. He had no idea I'd already accepted Northridge's offer that morning. Director of Operations, base salary $135,000, plus performance bonuses. I'd start in 2 weeks. I cleaned out my desk on a quiet Thursday evening after everyone had gone home. No dramatic announcement, no confrontation, no farewell speeches. Just me, a cardboard box, and 20 years of accumulated items that suddenly seemed less important than I'd imagined. Photos of Emily at various ages, a coffee mug from the company's 10th anniversary, awards for projects Ryan's generation had never heard of. I left behind only a brief note for Patricia in HR, placed in an envelope on her desk. "Thank you for the opportunity. My resignation is effective immediately." Professional, courteous, revealing nothing. I walked out of Hawthorne Logistics at 7:45 p.m., carrying that single box to my truck. No one was there to witness it. No one realized the scale of what was coming. How many client relationships, how much institutional knowledge, how many critical systems walked out that door with me. Ryan would discover it soon enough, piece by piece, as things started breaking down without the man he'd considered disposable to fix them. My first day at North Ridge Industrial felt like stepping into sunlight after years in shadow. The building was smaller than Hawthorne's headquarters, less flashy, but the atmosphere was completely different. Marcus met me in the lobby personally, shaking my hand with genuine warmth. "Welcome aboard, Jack. We're lucky to have you." My office had a window, a real window with a view of the city skyline. My name was already on the door, Jack Turner, Director of Operations. People introduced themselves throughout the morning, asking real questions about my experience, actually listening to my answers. By afternoon, I was in meetings where my input was requested, considered, implemented. No one interrupted me. No one dismissed my ideas as outdated. No one smirked when I spoke. I felt like a man who'd been given back his name, his dignity, his purpose. During lunch, I sat alone in my new office, looking out at the skyline, and realized my hands weren't shaking anymore. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere again. 3 weeks into my new position, Marcus called me into his office with an excited energy. "Jack, we just secured a major opportunity. Brookfield's parent company was so impressed with how you saved their project that they're recommending us for a huge shipping contract. $1.2 million over 18 months. He slid the proposal across his desk. "Only complication is it overlaps with existing Hawthorne Logistics territory. They're going to fight for this one." My stomach tightened with anticipation. "Who's leading their side?" Marcus checked his notes. "Project manager named Ryan Cole. You know him?" I kept my expression neutral, professional. "We've worked together." "Well, this'll be interesting then. They've had the regional advantage, but honestly, their reputation's been slipping lately. Client complaints about missed deadlines, communication issues. We've got a real shot here." As I walked back to my office, I felt a smile tugging at my lips. The universe had a sense of poetry after all. Ryan and I were about to compete directly, but this time we'd be playing on level ground. The following Monday, Ryan called Northridge's main office line. I wasn't there when the call came through. I was in a meeting with our logistics team, but my assistant, Carmen, took detailed notes with barely concealed amusement. According to her, Ryan had been snappy and condescending, treating her like an inconvenient obstacle. "Tell whoever's running operations over there that we'll need an urgent call," he'd apparently said. "We're negotiating big numbers here, and Hawthorne's been the regional leader for years. We don't have time for amateur hour." Carmen, who'd been in logistics for 15 years herself, had smiled sweetly into the phone. "Of course, sir. I'll make sure Mr. Turner gets your message right away." There was a long pause on Ryan's end. "Turner?" "Yes, sir. Jack Turner, our director of operations. Should I have him call you back at Hawthorne?" Another pause, longer this time. Then Ryan's voice, carefully controlled. "No. I'll send an email." Carmen told me this story with evident delight, and I couldn't help but laugh. The game was just beginning. Ryan's email arrived that afternoon, formal and professional. "Dear North Ridge Operations Team, this is to confirm our upcoming joint meeting regarding the Brookfield expansion contract. Hawthorne Logistics looks forward to presenting our proposal and discussing partnership opportunities. Best regards, Ryan Cole, Project Manager." Standard corporate language, nothing revealing. I had Carmen send the reply. "Meeting confirmed for Thursday, 10 a.m., North Ridge Conference Room B. Director Jack Turner will be present along with our contract team. Looking forward to productive discussions." I watched my email, waiting for his response. It took 3 hours. I imagined him staring at his screen, trying to process the information. When his reply finally came, it was brief. "Confirmed." Just that one word. I could practically feel the panic behind it. He knew now. He knew I'd landed somewhere. Knew I had a title. Knew we'd be sitting across from each other. But he didn't know how much power had shifted until he'd walk into that room and see me sitting at the head of the table. That realization was going to be exquisite. Thursday morning arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, crisp autumn air. The kind of day that felt made for new beginnings. Our team assembled early in Conference Room B. Marcus would lead the negotiations, but he'd made it clear this was my project to guide. At 9:55, I watched through the glass wall as Ryan entered the building with his team, 3 people I recognized, including Kyle, the grad school specialist who still couldn't run a logistics report without help. Ryan wore his most expensive suit, walking with that swagger I knew so well, radiating confidence. Marcus met them at reception and escorted them to the conference room. I waited inside, sitting calmly at the head of the table, hands folded over the contract file. The door opened. Ryan walked in mid-sentence saying something about market dominance, and then he saw me. He froze completely, the words dying in his throat. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, confusion, disbelief, then something like fear. "Good morning, Ryan," I said evenly. Long time. The silence in that room was thick enough to choke on. His team looked between us, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Marcus smiled politely, gesturing to chairs. "Please have a seat. Let's get started." Ryan recovered his composure with visible effort, settling into his chair across from me. "Didn't expect to see you here, Jack," he said, trying to sound casual. The condescension was still there, but thinner now, stretched over uncertainty. I opened the contract file calmly, not rising to the bait. "Life's full of surprises. You wanted to negotiate the Brookfield expansion. Let's talk terms." For the next hour, I watched Ryan try to control the room the way he'd controlled every meeting at Hawthorne. He threw out numbers, made bold claims about Hawthorne's capabilities, talked about their innovative approaches to logistics management. But every time he made a claim, I had data to counter it. When he mentioned their industry-leading delivery times, I pulled up comparative metrics showing North Ridge's superior performance. When he referenced their extensive vendor network, I noted the 3 major vendors who'd recently dropped Hawthorne due to payment disputes. Information I'd learned through relationships he'd never bothered to build. Marcus asked pointed questions that Ryan stumbled over. For the first time, Ryan Cole was the one squirming, struggling, desperately trying to regain authority he'd never actually earned. The meeting stretched into its second hour. Ryan's team was getting visibly uncomfortable, watching their leader founder. Kyle kept trying to help with data points, but his inexperience showed painfully. At one point, Ryan leaned back and tried to redirect with a personal jab. "You know, Jack, this is quite the career change for you." I met his eyes calmly. "I remember when you said I'd never earn 6 figures. He blinked, caught off guard. "Yeah." The room went quiet. Marcus looked interested. Ryan's team looked confused. I kept my voice level professional, but let the words land with weight. "Turns out, you were right. I didn't earn 6 figures." I paused, then slid the contract across the table. I signed for a $1.2 million contract instead. Dead silence. Absolute, crushing silence. Even Ryan's team looked at him with something between disbelief and secondhand embarrassment. His face flushed red, then pale. Marcus coughed to cover a smile. The balance of power in that room had shifted completely, undeniably. Ryan had spent months tearing me down, and I just dismantled him with simple truth. No cruelty, no mockery, just numbers he couldn't argue with. The meeting ended 30 minutes later with Marcus shaking hands politely, promising the board would review both proposals carefully. But everyone in that room knew which way the decision would go. Ryan left without meeting my eyes, his team following in uncomfortable silence. Over the next 2 weeks, the contract went to North Ridge, officially based on superior operational efficiency and competitive pricing. But everyone in the industry knew what had really happened. Word spread fast in logistics circles. Ryan Cole lost the Brookfield contract to his former employee. Hawthorne's bleeding talent. North Ridge's new director used to work under Cole. Isn't that ironic? Within a month, Hawthorne had lost 2 more contracts, clients citing concerns about leadership and reliability. An internal investigation revealed the performance issues: missed deadlines, poor communication, the systematic dismissal of experienced staff that had gutted their institutional knowledge. Ryan was demoted to senior analyst, his project management authority stripped away. The arrogance that had defined him crumbled under the weight of consequences he'd never imagined would reach him. For months later, my phone rang with a number I'd deleted but still recognized. I almost didn't answer. Curiosity won. "Hello, Jack." Ryan's voice sounded hollow, stripped of its swagger. "It's Ryan Cole. I know this is awkward, but I wanted to reach out." Silence stretched between us. "I got laid off last month. Hawthorne downsized the whole department. I've been applying around, but the market's tough and, well, word gets around." He cleared his throat. "I know we didn't end things well. I was out of line with some of the things I said. If you ever need someone, contract work, consulting, anything, I'd appreciate you keeping me in mind." The old Jack would have felt sympathy, would have helped despite everything. But I'd learned something important over the past months. You don't owe loyalty to people who showed you none. "Ryan," I said, keeping my tone polite but firm, "you once told me this industry's for young blood, that old dogs like me were obsolete." I paused. "Maybe you were right." I hung up before he could respond. Not cruel, just final. The conversation we should have had months ago, the boundary I should have set years ago. Last Saturday, I drove to Emily's campus to take her to lunch. She'd aced her midterms and wanted to celebrate. We ate at that same Italian place, and over dessert, she studied my face with her mother's perceptive eyes. "Dad, you look different. Happier." I smiled, realizing she was right. The permanent tension I'd carried for years had dissolved. My shoulders didn't ache anymore. I slept through nights without work anxiety waking me at 3 a.m. "I finally am," I admitted. After lunch, we walked to my truck, and Emily stopped, staring at the door. Someone from North Ridge's facilities team had added custom lettering, while I'd been visiting. "Turner Operations Director." She hugged me fiercely. "I'm so proud of you." Driving home, I passed the Hawthorne Logistics building, its signs still gleaming in the sunlight. I felt nothing looking at it, no anger, no bitterness, no regret. Just peace. The quiet, profound peace of a man who'd walked through fire and discovered he was stronger than the flames. Ryan had tried to diminish me, but he'd actually freed me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic. It's simply becoming the person they said you'd never be, succeeding in ways they insisted were impossible, and walking forward without looking back. No applause, no fireworks. Just the knowledge that I finally stood exactly where I belonged.